I was just going back for a shawl when I heard his laugh from the living room. My son. He was on a video call, telling his wife he'd done it. He'd moved $350,000 out of my retirement accounts. He said they just needed a few more weeks to prove I'd lost my mind. My name is Lorraine Hale. I am 62 years old, a widow, living alone in this quiet house in the suburbs of Phoenix. I had only stepped back inside to grab my shawl, the evening air having more of a chill than I'd expected, when I froze by the kitchen doorway. I heard laughter. It was my son, Tyler, from the living room. I pressed myself against the wall, hidden from view. He was on a video call, his screen angled away from me. I recognized the sharp, digital voice of his wife, Madison Cross. Tyler laughed again, a sound that usually warmed me, but this time it was brittle. He leaned toward his screen and asked, as if telling a clever joke, "Mom, what would you do if you lost everything?" He paused, then let out a sharp bark of a laugh. Well, I guess she's about to find out. My heart stopped. It didn't just skip a beat. It ceased all movement. "It's done," Tyler boasted, his voice dripping with a smug pride I had never heard before. Over $350,000 moved clean. I pulled it from her retirement and the main investment fund. He was talking about my money, my life, everything Jack and I had saved. "It's sitting in the new Westlake Savings and Trust account under your name, Maddie." That power of attorney she signed was a gift from God. Madison's voice cut through the air, devoid of any humor. "Don't celebrate. Ty, it's not done. You have to file the guardianship petition immediately. We need that evaluation proving she's cognitively impaired. I want her cut off from all financial decisions within a few weeks. A few weeks." I felt the stucco of the wall press into my shoulder blade. I couldn't breathe. Then Madison spoke again, and the words she used will be burned into my memory until the day I die. "She's the last cash cow. Ty, we need to get her to the slaughter before she realizes the gate is open." Tyler didn't object. He didn't defend me. He laughed. "Don't worry. I'll make sure she has enough left for her meds." "That's decent enough, isn't it? Decent?" The room tilted. My mind flashed back, unwanted images colliding with the horror in the next room. Tyler, age 8, gasping with croup in the middle of the night. Me, sitting on the bathroom floor with the shower running hot, my hand on his back, whispering that it would be okay, that I was right here. Me, 20 years later, holding him when his first big career deal fell apart. All those nights I'd stayed awake, worrying, praying, protecting him. That boy was gone. In his place was a man discussing my execution as if it were a business merger. I knew, instinctively, that if I ran out there screaming, it would be the end. He would deny everything. He would look at me with that wounded, concerned expression he'd perfected. He would tell Madison I was having an episode. He would blame my poor memory. They were already painting the picture of me as senile, and this would be the final brushstroke. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I backed away from the doorway, silent as a ghost. I retreated to the front door, pulled it softly shut, and then, taking a shaky breath, I opened it again, this time letting it slam just hard enough. "Tyler," I called out, forcing a weary brightness into my voice. "I'm back. I forgot my shawl." I walked into the living room, forcing a tired smile. The transformation was sickening. Tyler immediately clicked off the video call. His entire posture changed, the cruel tension dissolving into the familiar mask of the devoted son. "Hey, Mum," he said, standing up to give me a kiss on the cheek. "You're always forgetting that thing. You feeling okay?" He looked concerned. He looked loving. "I was just thinking, we should really sit down this week. I want to help you organize all that financial stuff, just to make sure you're safer." I had to clench my teeth to keep from vomiting. Safer. I felt the tears pressing hot behind my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I patted his arm. "That sounds wonderful. Honey, you always take such good care of me." He left soon after, satisfied. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the driveway and the sound faded down the street. I didn't turn on the lamps. I walked into the dining room and sank into my chair, the room cloaked in shadow. My hand found the pen cup on the sideboard. I pulled out the cheap blue ballpoint pen, the one I had used a few months ago to sign that power of attorney. I gripped it so hard, the plastic dug into my palm. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak. They thought I was done. I sat there in the dark and made a promise to myself. I would not be slaughtered. I would not be one of those silent victims. I sat in that darkness for what must have been hours, my hand still aching from gripping the pen. The past few months, the past few years, began to unspool in my mind, replaying in this new, horrifying light. My eyes drifted to the small, leather-bound passbook on the desk, the first one Jack and I ever opened at the Desert Star Credit Union. I saw us, decades younger, scrubbing down the inside of a rusted-out food truck. That truck was the beginning of Sunrise Table Catering. My husband, Jack Hale, was the heart of it, and I was the hands and the books. We built it from nothing. I remembered the day Tyler was born, how Jack held him up to the light in our tiny apartment. "Everything we build, Lorraine," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every single thing. It's all for him." Jack planted that seed in my heart, and I watered it every day. Tyler wasn't just our son. He was our legacy, the sole inheritor of everything we sweat for. Those years were a blur of hard work. We were the first to arrive at the kitchens and the last to leave. We missed vacations. We celebrated anniversaries over shared invoices. And we scrimped and saved every penny. We paid off our debts. We slowly expanded the business. And we never, ever missed a contribution to our retirement fund. That money at Desert Star was meant for our old age, our safety net. When Jack was killed in that accident on the highway 7 years ago, my world ended. Tyler became my only anchor. He was the one who held me, who managed the funeral, who sat with me through the endless, crushing quiet. He helped me with the paperwork to sell Sunrise Table Catering to that large food conglomerate, Nova Bite Foods. I was too lost in grief to handle it, and he was so strong, so capable. He sat with me at this very table, spreading the statements from the sale across the wood. "Mum, the market is complicated now," he said, his voice gentle. "Let me help you. We'll invest the sale money into your retirement accounts, some safe stocks. I'll help you keep an eye on it." I was so relieved. He was the only one who knew the full picture of my finances. Then, Madison entered his life. She was 35, a polished digital marketing specialist who always looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. I was happy for Tyler. Truly I was. But there was something about her eyes. They never rested. The first time she came here for dinner, I watched her gaze sweep the room, cataloguing everything. She looked at the silver candlesticks, at Jack's old painting on the wall, and her eyes lingered, as if she were appraising them. Madison was smart. She would bring up retirement plans, praising me. "You're so lucky to have Tyler looking out for your financial future. Lorraine." She made me feel proud of him, proud of the security we had built. I trusted her because Tyler trusted her. I told them everything. I gave them every number, every account. A dinner 6 months ago flashed in my mind. Tyler and Madison, together, presented the idea. "Mum, we were thinking," Tyler started. "You should really sign a financial power of attorney at Heritage First Credit Union." Madison chimed in. "It's just a precaution. Imagine if you fell and broke your leg. You wouldn't be able to get to the bank." I remember I hesitated. It felt like signing something away. But Tyler, seeing my pause, leaned in. He told me a story about a colleague at his office who'd had a stroke, how his family couldn't access his money for weeks to pay the medical bills. The story terrified me. I was alone. What if I fell? I signed it. Looking back at every single milestone, I could see it. Every concerned question, every helpful suggestion, every piece of advice that was for my own good. It was all a lie. They weren't building a safety net for me. They were just slowly, carefully, digging my grave. I didn't sleep a single second that night. The hours ticked by in the suffocating silence of the house, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I was terrified of Tyler, of the stranger he had become. But a deeper, colder fear was settling in my stomach. I was afraid of myself, of the woman who had been so blind, so trusting, so profoundly stupid. When the first grey light of morning filtered through the blinds, I got up, dressed in the clothes from the day before, and drove. I ended up at the Copper Mug, a small cafe that smelled of burnt coffee and old newspapers. It was where my best friend, Gloria Jenkins, held court every morning. Gloria is 64. She spent her entire career as a clerk at the county courthouse, and she knows the smell of trouble better than anyone. She looked up when the bell on the door chimed, a welcoming smile on her face that vanished the second she saw me. I didn't have to say a word. The tremor in my hands, the hollow look in my eyes, was enough. "Lorraine," she said, her voice dropping. My God. "Sit down." I slid into the booth, and the story spilled out of me in a ragged whisper. I told her everything I had heard. The video call, the $350,000, the plan for guardianship. When I repeated Tyler's joke about me losing everything, and the cruel laugh that followed, Gloria's face turned to stone. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered clarity. "Lorraine, listen to me," she said, her voice sharp. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is not your memory being bad. This is abuse, financial abuse, and they are moving fast." She immediately suggested we check my bank statements. If they're moving retirement funds, they're probably leveraging your assets. We need to look for new loans, a second mortgage, anything with your signature. Right there in the booth. She pulled out her laptop. My hands were shaking too badly to type in the password, so I gave her the information. She logged into my main credit union account. We watched the screen refresh, and there it was. It wasn't just the missing retirement funds. There was a new active loan, a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit taken out against my house, on Maple Ridge Lane, which I had owned free and clear for a decade. The signature was electronic. My name. Lorraine J. Hale. Gloria's suspicion was immediate. They used the power of attorney, she said, her voice flat with anger. They've turned your home into their personal ATM. They're borrowing against it. And you're the one who is now legally on the hook for the debt. A memory, sharp and sickening, hit me. Madison, about a month ago, stopping by with her tablet. Just need you to sign this. Lorraine, she'd said, all breezy efficiency. It's just an update to the terms on your home insurance. I remembered being annoyed at the tiny print, just scribbling my name on the screen to get it over with. It wasn't insurance. It was the loan document. Gloria saw the realization dawning on my face. She leaned across the table, forcing me to meet her eyes. You have to understand what happens next, she said, her voice leaving no room for denial. If you let this go, they will drain that credit line. They will sell the house. And then they will execute their final move. They will use this supposed cognitive decline to file for guardianship. They will get a doctor to sign off. They will have you declared incompetent. And they will put you in a state-run facility while they live off your money. Every protest you make will just be proof that Mum's not lucid anymore. The image of it, a sterile room, a shared television, me strapped into a chair, screaming that my son stole everything while nurses patted my head. It was so vivid I almost threw up. The grief was a physical weight, threatening to crush me. But as I looked at Gloria's face, not soft with pity, but hard with resolve, something else began to burn through the fear. It was a cold, quiet rage. They thought I was weak. They thought I was finished. If they think I'm weak, I whispered, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Then I will use that weakness as my mask. Gloria nodded, a grim smile finally touching her lips. There you are. We sat there until the coffee was ice cold. We made a plan. First, I would go home and play the part. I was the loving, slightly confused mother who knew nothing. Second, I would go to the bank and find a lawyer. Immediately. And third, Tyler was never to suspect. Not a word. Not a look. The trap was set for me, but I would be the one to spring it. I walked into the Heritage First Credit Union, feeling like a criminal. This was the bank where Jack and I had signed the papers for the sale of Sunrise Table Catering, the place where all our retirement hopes were stored. Marcus Klein, the branch manager, had known my family for years. He'd sent flowers when Jack died. He saw me waiting and immediately waved me into his glass-walled office. Lorraine, good to see you. Though you look a little pale. What can I do for you? I shut the door. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them in my lap. Marcus. I started, my voice a thin tremor. I need your help. I think there's a problem with my accounts. I think Tyler might be... I signed a power of attorney, and I'm afraid it's been abused. The friendly smile on his face vanished, replaced by a practiced, neutral mask. He didn't question me. He simply turned to his computer, clicked a few times, and then his face went completely white. He stared at the screen for a full minute. Marcus. He looked up at me, his eyes full of a new, sick understanding. Lorraine, I need to print these. He turned to the printer, his movements stiff. He laid 3 sheets of paper on his desk, side by side. What am I looking at? I asked, though I already knew. These are 3 separate wire transfers, all made in the last 2 months, he said, his voice low. They went to an account at Westlake Savings and Trust, under the name Madison Cross. I looked at the numbers. $350,000. Gone. My breath hitched. But Marcus wasn't done. He pulled another document. "And this," he said, his voice even tighter, "is the activity on the home equity line of credit that was opened against your property 6 weeks ago. There have been withdrawals totaling nearly $80,000. My hand went to my mouth. He showed me the loan document. There, at the bottom, was the electronic signature Lorraine J. Hale. I stared at it, the tears finally blurring my vision. "I didn't sign that," I whispered. "You didn't have to," Marcus said grimly. "This signature was executed using the authorization token attached to the power of attorney. Tyler's power of attorney." He explained the laws, the ones in place to protect seniors, but they all sounded like thin, useless shields. He advised me to put an immediate freeze on all my accounts, to lock down any new transactions. He said he was required to report this to the bank's internal fraud department, and that I absolutely needed, to contact the state's Adult Protective Services. As he was talking, he was still clicking, pulling up the old files related to the sale of Sunrise Table Catering. "I just want to see how deep the access went," he muttered. He printed another page, looked at it, and swore under his breath. "What is it?" I asked, my voice numb. He slid the paper toward me. "When you sold the company, Tyler had you sign a stack of tax advisory documents. This one. Lorraine. This makes you a co-guarantor on a business loan for his private consulting firm, Hale Growth Strategies." I didn't understand. "What does that mean?" "It means," Marcus said, rubbing his temples, "that if Tyler defaults on his business loans, the bank can come after your assets to pay his debt. They can seize your house. They can take everything. Even if you get the stolen retirement money back, you could still lose everything because you are his financial safety net." The room felt small, the air thick. It wasn't just theft. It was systematic. Tyler hadn't just stolen from me. He had strapped me to the front of his own fraudulent enterprise. He had used my name, my credit, my entire life's work as a human shield. Marcus wrote a name and number on a piece of paper and pressed it into my hand. "This is Naomi Blake at Silver Shield Legal Aid. It's a non-profit, and she is the best elder financial abuse lawyer in the state. Don't wait. Lorraine. You need to call her today. You have maybe a few days before they realize the accounts are locked." I stumbled out of the bank into the blinding Phoenix sunlight. The world looked sharp and hostile. I felt a clear, cold line being drawn right through my heart. On one side was the woman I had been yesterday, the mother who loved her son, who trusted him with her life. On the other side was the woman I was now, a woman who had to walk into a lawyer's office and treat her only child as the enemy. The office of Silver Shield Legal Aid was in a nondescript strip mall, but the woman inside was anything but. Naomi Blake was young, maybe 30, but her eyes were sharp, and she didn't waste a single word on comfort. I sat with Gloria in her cramped office, and as I retold my story, Naomi just nodded, her pen flying across a legal pad. When I finished, she looked up, and her gaze was harder than Gloria's. "Lorraine, let's be very clear," she said, tapping her pen. "What your son is doing is not a family matter. It is a crime, and we will treat it as such. The relief of being believed, so completely and immediately, was overwhelming." Naomi laid out the plan. First, she would send official preservation and freeze notices to every bank involved. Second, she was filing an immediate report with Adult Protective Services of Maricopa County, flagging it as high risk. Third, she would begin compiling the evidence package for the Fulton Ridge District Attorney's Office for criminal charges. "I need you to do one thing," she said, handing me a fresh legal pad. "Write down everything you remember from that video call. The exact words. Cash cow. Slaughter. The time. The date. In a courtroom, the detailed memory of an elderly victim is often, unfairly, put on trial. We are going to make yours ironclad." On the drive home, Gloria added her own strategic note. "The law is good," she said. "But Tyler is arrogant. He thinks he's smarter than you. He thinks you're declining. What if you let him think he's right?" I looked at her. "What do you mean, you start declining a little faster," Gloria said, a flinty look in her eye. "Be forgetful. Ask him the same question 3 times. Get confused about the day. Let him get comfortable. Let him get sloppy. And the next time he comes over, you find a way to record him." So I began the performance of my life. I started asking Tyler to explain simple bills to me, sighing and saying I just couldn't keep track anymore. I'd ask him what day it was, twice in one conversation. It was grotesque, but it worked. I could see the shift in his eyes. He stopped talking to me like his mother and started talking to me like a child. A burden he was benevolently managing. He was practically patting me on the head. He stopped by 2 days later, saying he wanted to help pay my bills so I wouldn't get confused. I had my small digital recorder, the one I used to use for bird calls, set to on and tucked into the pocket of my housecoat. As he sat at my dining room table, his phone buzzed. He picked it up, putting it on speaker. It was Madison. "How's she doing?" Madison asked, her voice bored. "She's right here, just shuffling her papers," Tyler said, his voice loud and slow, as if I were deaf. "Don't worry, Maddie. A few more weeks is all we need. I've got the appointment with the new geriatric specialist. We just need him to sign the papers saying she's not competent. And it's done. Total guardianship." I just sat there, pretending to look for a stamp, my blood turning to ice. I took the recording to Naomi's office the next morning. She listened to it, her expression tightening with every word. "This is it," she said. "Saving the file. This is golden. This is proof of intent to commit guardianship abuse. It's not just a financial disagreement anymore." She immediately escalated the file, requesting that APS coordinate with the Economic Crimes Division of the local police. Things moved faster after that. 2 days later, Naomi called. An APS investigator named Victor, reviewing the file, had run Madison's full name. "Madison Cross," Naomi said, her voice tight. The name popped up in an old report out of Florida. Financial abuse of an elderly mother. The man was a different son, not Tyler. The report says the case was withdrawn before it could be prosecuted. Gloria and I were on a plane to Florida the next morning. We found the address in the report, a rundown rental apartment in a humid, grey complex. We knocked, and the door was opened by Helen Crawford. She was a frail woman, maybe 70, with terrified eyes. She trembled as she told us her story. She had a wonderful daughter-in-law for a year, a woman named Madison. Madison had been so helpful, so kind, convincing Helen's son that for tax purposes and to protect his mother's future, they should put Helen's house and savings into joint accounts. The moment the last account was signed over, Madison and her son both vanished. Helen hadn't seen her son in 3 years and was now living on Social Security. Hearing her thin, reedy voice, I realized what I was doing. This wasn't just about my money. It wasn't just about my house. I was looking at my own future, and I was the only person on earth who could stop this professional predator from creating another Helen. This was no longer just about justice for me. It was about stopping her for good. Tyler was becoming impatient. I could feel it radiating off him, a high-strung, nervous energy replacing the smug confidence. He started showing up more often, always unannounced, always using the same excuse. Just worried about your health. Mom. But these visits were inspections, and they came with new, heavy-handed suggestions. I've been looking at a wonderful place. Mom, he said one afternoon, tossing a glossy brochure onto my coffee table. Sunset Palms, assisted living. It's got round-the-clock care, 24/7. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I knew I had to lean into the role he wanted for me. I developed a slight, dry cough that I couldn't seem to shake. I began walking more slowly, gripping the furniture for balance. When he was there, my hands would tremble just enough as I reached for a glass of water. I started, accidentally, dropping unimportant mail on the floor, letting out a frustrated little sigh, and I'd watch him pick it up with a look of such profound, exasperated pity. He was convinced I was losing control. What he didn't know was that Naomi now had every important document I owned: my original will, the house deed, my birth certificate locked safely in her office. One evening, he arrived with a thick stack of spiral-bound papers and an expensive pen. Just some long-term care insurance forms. Mom, he said, spreading them on the dining room table. He was all business. We need to get this signed quickly. The premiums are only going up. I put my reading glasses on, squinting at the dense text. My phone, its audio recorder already active, was placed between us on the table, next to the salt shaker. Oh, Tyler, this print is so small. What is this part saying about indemnity? He let out an audible, put-upon sigh. It's just standard liability. Mum, it's not a big deal. You don't need to read all of it. That's what I'm here for. But I want to understand. I insisted, my voice quavering slightly. You'll have to speak up. Honey, my hearing isn't what it was this morning. He practically shouted. It means they cover the care. Look, just sign it. When I still hesitated, he lost his composure. Honestly, Mum, after the guardianship papers are approved by the court, you won't have to worry about signing any of this stuff ever again. The words hung in the air, cold and definitive. He'd said it. He had confirmed, on tape, that he was already planning for a time when my signature, my consent, meant nothing. I brought the recording to Naomi's office. She and Gloria listened, and I saw a dangerous glint light up in Naomi's eyes. He's arrogant, Naomi said. He's greedy, and he thinks you're stupid. We're going to use that. She proposed a counter-offensive, a sting. I would approach Tyler, mentioning that I had some money he didn't know about, money I supposedly wanted to invest before I forgot about it. The entire setup would be a trap, designed by the Economic Crimes Unit. Gloria, who I discovered was a surprisingly good actress, took on the role of my old friend. She called me when she knew Tyler was visiting. I put her on speakerphone. Gloria pitched a fake, exclusive resort development called the Coyote Ridge Retreat. She spoke of insider access, high returns, and a quick, massive profit. I watched Tyler's face. His eyes lit up. He was leaning in, practically vibrating with greed. He immediately took the phone, firing questions at Gloria, talking about how he could handle the investment for me to maximize the profit and protect it from taxes. While Tyler was busy researching this fictional gold mine, Naomi and I were making a very real, very quiet move. She drew up the papers for a new, irrevocable trust at a different bank. Mesa Horizon Trust Services. We quietly and legally transferred the ownership of my house and the few assets that Tyler hadn't yet managed to touch into this trust. Naomi appointed 2 beneficiaries, Gloria Jenkins, and a local charity for the support of elderly victims of fraud. Tyler's name was nowhere. This wasn't just protection for me. It was a cold, precise counterblow. It was soft revenge. Even if something happened to me tomorrow, the natural inheritance he was so confidently counting on, the inheritance he was willing to destroy my life to get, was already gone. He just didn't know it. He became almost manic about the Coyote Ridge deal, calling me daily, pushing me to get the funds ready. His patience with my frailties wore thinner. He'd snap at me if I asked a question twice. Mom, focus. We talked about this yesterday. Don't you remember? I had to swallow the acid in my throat, nod meekly, and play the confused old woman. I let him yell. I let him condescend. I needed him to stay focused on the bait, to keep him completely and utterly blind to the real trap closing around him. But the acting took its toll. At night, alone in the house Jack and I built, the silence was deafening. I would sit in the dark, and a question would surface, a nasty, persistent whisper. Was I just fighting for justice, for what was mine, or had I crossed a line? Was I now in the business of revenge, of methodically and coldly destroying my own son? I looked at my reflection in the dark window, at the hard lines around my mouth, and I realized I didn't much care what the answer was. The line between the two had blurred into nothing. Tyler, high on the prospect of his imaginary windfall, called me. He wanted to take me to a celebratory dinner at a fancy, overpriced steakhouse in downtown Phoenix. We're closing the Coyote Ridge deal, Mom, he said, his voice slick with manufactured excitement. And we just have a few final papers to get out of the way to complete the portfolio. I agreed, my voice a breathy whisper of anticipation he mistook for frailty. Naomi and Gloria didn't miss a beat. They arranged for the 2 economic crimes investigators and the caseworker from APS to be there, seated at a dark corner booth. I was to wear the heavy silver locket Jack had given me for our 20th anniversary. Naomi had replaced the tiny, faded photo of him with a high-fidelity microphone. When the waiter seated me at Tyler's table, I was surprised to see Madison already there. She hadn't been mentioned. She jumped up, all lipstick and gleaming white teeth, and pulled me into an airy, false hug. Lorraine Tyler told me you were finally letting him help you with these investments. It's so wonderful. Her smile was dazzling, but her eyes were like 2 chips of blue ice. As I sat down, she leaned in conspiratorially. It's a good thing, too. I was just looking at some of the doctor's records Tyler has been collecting. It's clear your memory just isn't what it used to be. My hand tightened on my water glass. I wanted to throw it in her face. Instead, I just looked at her, blinking, as if in confusion. Tyler, all false charm, slid a thick, leather-bound folder in front of me. Here we are, Mum, just like we discussed. He fanned out the pages. This one is just the standard investment representation for the Coyote Ridge deal. And these, he tapped the other stack, are just some minor adjustments to the preventative guardianship file. Just a formality. So I can sign for you if, you know, something unexpected happens. I put on my glasses and picked up the top page, letting my hand tremble violently. Oh, Tyler. I don't know. There's so much text. I pointed to a line, my finger shaking. What does this one mean? Does this give you the right to sell the house? He sighed, annoyed. Yes, Mum. We talked about this. It's to protect the asset. I moved to another page. And this one? Does this mean you get to make all the decisions about my money, about where I live? Does this mean you can put me in that Sunset Palms place? I had raised my voice just enough. He had to lean in and speak clearly, his voice sharp with impatience. Yes. It gives me full control of your finances and your medical care. It's to protect you from yourself. Now, please, just sign. Madison was looking around, her foot tapping. She was nervous. Ty, she hissed. Just get her to sign. We need to close the procedure before the bank flags those undeclared transfers from your company. My head snapped up, and I stared at her. His company, Hale Growth Strategies. It wasn't just me he was stealing from. He was embezzling. Across the room, I saw Naomi, who had been listening on an earpiece, subtly nod to the man beside her. She typed a quick text. The investigator's phone buzzed. She was confirming it. The loans he'd forced me to co-sign, the ones that had put my house at risk, were to cover the money he was stealing from his own company. My heart was hammering, but not from fear. It was from a cold, precise adrenaline. I knew what I had to do. I looked at the pen Tyler was holding out. I reached for it. And then, with a gasp, I clutched my chest, my eyes wide. I slumped back into the plush upholstery of the chair, letting my head loll to the side. Mum, Tyler yelled, panic in his voice. The restaurant went quiet. Madison just stared. Oh, for God's sake, she muttered. Instantly, a man was at our table. Excuse me, he said, his voice calm and authoritative. I'm a doctor. Can I be of assistance? It was one of the investigators. He felt my pulse. Her pulse is thready. She needs some air. Let's get her away from the crowd. He nodded to a waiter. Is there a staff room? He and the APS worker guided me, half carrying my limp body, toward the back of the restaurant, leaving Tyler and Madison in a shocked daze at the table. The moment the break room door closed, I stood up straight. Naomi was right behind us, pulling a single, crisp document from her briefcase. This is the official criminal complaint and sworn affidavit. Lorraine, she said quickly. It details everything, including your attestation that you are being coerced into signing documents under dupery. Sign here and here. The investigator will witness it. I took the pen, my hand perfectly steady, and signed my name. This signature was my own. It was the one that mattered. It legally nullified anything Tyler had tried to make me sign tonight. I took 2 deep breaths, rubbed the color from my face, and mussed my hair. I looked at Naomi. How do I look? Like a terrified old woman, she said, a tiny smile on her lips. The investigator guided me back to the table. I looked pale, shaken, and confused. Tyler and Madison were standing, their faces a mask of anxiety and fury. Jesus, Mum, you scared us. Tyler spat, his charm completely gone. He shoved the folder and the pen back at me. Look, let's just get this done. Sign it. We need to go. Sign it quickly. Lorraine, Madison urged, her voice a low growl. I just stared at the page, the pen hovering in my shaking hand, letting the recorder in my necklace capture every last, desperate, damning word. The disastrous dinner ended with me recovering enough to be driven home. I didn't sign the papers. I simply clutched my chest and said I needed to see my own doctor, that I didn't feel well. Tyler and Madison left the restaurant in a barely concealed rage, their final, desperate attempt thwarted. The panic must have set in almost immediately. Later that night, Marcus called Naomi, who then called me. After we left, Tyler had received an automated email from Heritage First Credit Union. The freeze that Naomi had put in place a week prior had finally, officially, flagged his access. His name was now attached to an internal investigation. Marcus told Naomi that their system logs showed a frantic, failed attempt by Tyler, logged in with his credentials, to wire the remaining funds from the home equity line, the money he thought was still there, to a cryptocurrency platform called North Wave Exchange. Naomi assured me the transfer had been blocked, but the attempt was the digital confession we needed. He was no longer just planning to steal. He was actively trying to liquidate and hide the assets. He knew the walls were closing in. His call came the next morning. His voice was a strained, high-pitched version of his usual concern. Mom, are you okay? I'm so worried about you after last night. I let my voice sound thin, exhausted. I'm just very tired. Tyler. My heart. Mum, I need you to think, he said, the fake concern slipping into an urgent, clipped tone. Did you go to the bank recently? Did you talk to Marcus? Did they make you sign anything? Mum, did someone from that bank try to trick you into signing something? The hypocrisy was so astounding it almost made me laugh. Oh, I don't know. Honey, I said, letting my voice trail off into confusion. I don't remember. I think I was there. They did ask a lot of strange questions. It's all such a muddle. He was quiet for a second, and I could hear Madison muttering furiously in the background. Then Tyler came back on the line, his voice dripping with forced sincerity. You know what? This has all been a big misunderstanding. Maddie and I. We feel terrible. We want to come over this weekend. We'll bring dinner. A real family dinner. Just us. We'll clear the air, and we can just clean up all this messy paperwork. I knew exactly what clean up meant. This was their last chance. They were going to come into my house and try to bully me into signing those guardianship papers before the banks or the police took another step. I called Naomi immediately. It's the perfect trap, she said, her voice electric. They're coming to you, with the final piece of evidence, in your home. This is better than we could have planned. She explained the next steps. The Fulton Ridge District Attorney's Office was now fully on board. They were coordinating with APS and getting a search warrant for Tyler and Madison's condo, and, crucially, a warrant to place temporary, court-approved audio and video recording devices in my living room. The night before the family dinner, Gloria brought her overnight bag and a bottle of cheap, strong red wine. We sat in my living room, the lights low. The technicians had already been two quiet men who had installed a tiny, almost invisible camera lens in the smoke detector and a microphone under the coffee table. Are you ready for this? Lorraine? Gloria asked, swirling her wine. When they walk in here tomorrow, that's it. There's no going back. You know you'll have to face him in court. Right. I looked at the empty chair where Jack used to sit. I faced the man who killed Jack in court. Glow. I listened to him lie. I thought that was the hardest thing I'd ever do. The tears finally came, hot and silent. How do you do this? How do you sit on a stand and testify against your own son? Gloria took my hand. Her own eyes were wet. You do it, she whispered. Because he stopped being your son the second he laughed about you losing everything. You do it for Helen Crawford. You do it for yourself. We sat there for a long time, two old women in the dark, preparing for war. They arrived at 7, not with a home-cooked meal, but with 2 bags of takeout and the same leather-bound folder from the restaurant. Madison was all tight smiles. Tyler looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Mum," Tyler said, skipping all pretense of a social evening. He pulled the documents out. "We're not leaving until this is done. This is an emergency guardianship petition. We've filled it all out. All you have to do is sign here, at the bottom. It just shows the court that you're agreeing to this voluntarily," Madison added, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. I put my glasses on, my hands performing their now perfect tremor. "Guardianship?" I asked, looking up at him, my eyes wide and confused. Does that mean what I think it means, that you decide everything, that you can sell this house? My house. Tyler's patience snapped. He threw his hands up. "Yes, Mum. That's what it means. It means I make the decisions. Because you are clearly not capable of making them. It's to protect you. Why don't you understand that?" I hesitated, looking at the pen. Madison stepped forward, her face contorting into a mask of pure, undisguised contempt. "Lorraine, if you don't sign this piece of paper right now," she threatened, "we will just go to the judge on Monday and prove you're incompetent anyway. It's your choice. It can be easy, or it can be less pleasant." Right at that moment, as the threat hung in the air, a sound cut through the room. It was not a polite knock. It was a loud, hard, rhythmic pounding on the front door. Tyler and Madison froze. The pounding came again. "Open the door, police. We have a warrant." The color drained from Tyler's face. Madison looked wildly around the room, as if searching for an escape route. Before either of them could move, the front door swung open, and the room was suddenly, shockingly, full of people. 2 uniformed officers, the investigators from the restaurant, and a sharp-looking woman from the DA's office, holding up a file. "Tyler Hale Madison Cross," the woman from the DA's office said, her voice filling the silent room. "We have a warrant for your temporary arrest on suspicion of felony elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and economic fraud." The room, my quiet living room, was absolutely, perfectly still. Tyler leaped up from the sofa, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "This is a mistake," he yelled, his voice high and thin. "This is a massive misunderstanding." He lunged for the leather folder on the coffee table, the one holding the guardianship papers. "Do not touch the evidence, Mr. Hale," one of the investigators said, not raising his voice, but placing a firm hand on Tyler's arm to stop him. Madison was on her feet, but unlike Tyler, she was composed, her voice a low, threatening hiss. "You have no right. You barge into a private home. Our lawyer will have every single one of you disbarred." The woman from the Fulton Ridge District Attorney's office ignored her completely. She stood in the middle of my living room, the center of the storm, and read clearly from the warrant. This is an investigation into felony charges including, but not limited to, financial abuse of an elder by misuse of a power of attorney, grand theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted fraudulent use of guardianship for financial gain, and embezzlement from Hale Growth Strategies, using Ms. Lorraine Hale as an unknowing financial guarantor. I stood frozen, my hand gripping the wing of my armchair so hard my fingers ached. I watched my son. I watched the arrogant mask of the successful businessman shatter. I watched it move through confusion as the charges were listed. And then, when she said embezzlement and felony charges, I saw something I hadn't seen since he was a small child who had broken something irreplaceable. I saw pure, undiluted, animal fear. He wasn't thinking about his reputation. He was thinking about prison. His eyes, wide and desperate, snapped to me. I was his last resort, the final shield. "Mum!" he yelled, his voice pleading, almost a sob. "Mum, tell them. Tell them this is crazy. Tell them I was just helping you organize Mom. Please, tell them you let me move the money for the investment. You said I could tell them." The room went absolutely silent. Every officer, every investigator, and Naomi, who had stepped in quietly behind them, all turned to look at me. This was it. This was the crossroads. I was still his mother. I could say yes. I could say it was a misunderstanding. I could undo all of it, protect him, and in doing so, sentence myself to the very fate they had planned for me. Or I could choose the truth. I let out a long, slow breath. I met my son's desperate gaze. My voice, when it came, was clear and cold, and it did not tremble. "I never gave anyone permission to transfer my money," I said, addressing the DA. "I never gave anyone permission to borrow against my home. Every signature he got from me was a lie, or it was forged using the power of attorney he tricked me into signing. I am not his partner. I am his victim." Madison let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Oh, please. She's confused. Everything we did was to protect the family's assets. It was for her benefit." Was this for her benefit? Naomi's voice cut through. She stepped forward, holding her phone up. She pressed play. The room filled with the sound of my son's voice, captured in this very room. "A few more weeks. Just need him to sign the papers saying she's not competent. And it's done." Naomi swiped, playing the audio from the restaurant. "After the guardianship papers are approved by the court, you won't have to worry about signing any of this stuff ever again." Madison's face went white. Her composure, the mask of ice, didn't just crack. It disintegrated. Tyler saw it. He saw the last escape route close. And in a final, grotesque act of self-preservation, he turned on his wife. "It was her!" he shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Madison. "It was all her idea. She's the one who found the accounts. She's the one who told me to do it. I was just following her lead. I was going to pay it all back. Mum, I swear." He cried, turning back to me. "After the Coyote deal, I was going to put it all back." Madison stared at him, her expression twisting from shock into a look of such profound, murderous hatred that I almost recoiled. I listened to him, this stranger, this coward, blame his wife to save his own skin. I waited for the surge of rage, of pain, of betrayal. But there was nothing, just a vast, cold, desolate emptiness. The space inside me that had held a lifetime of love for my son was now a vacuum. He had made his choice. He had sealed the tomb on our relationship. A uniformed officer stepped behind Tyler. "Put your hands behind your back, sir." The metallic, final click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed in the silence. Tyler's body went rigid. He twisted, his face contorted, his eyes locking on mine. "Mom," he screamed, his voice breaking into a desperate wail. "You're letting them do this. You're killing me. Mom, you're killing your own son." I held his gaze for one last second. "No, Tyler," I said. "You did this to yourself." Then I turned my back on him. I turned, and I did not allow myself to watch them lead him away. Months later, I sat in the front row of a packed county courtroom, my hands laced tightly together in my lap. I watched the prosecutor, a sharp young woman who spoke with a cold, precise anger, lay out the entire timeline for the jury. She detailed the abuse of the power of attorney, the illegal transfers, the conspiracy to declare me incompetent, and the final, frantic attempt to move the money to the North Wave Exchange. The witnesses came one by one. Marcus Klein took the stand, his voice shaking with professional outrage as he detailed the irregular transactions. An economic crimes investigator spent a full day walking the jury through the tangled web of embezzlement at Hale Growth Strategies, showing exactly how Tyler had used my name as a shield. And then, on a large screen, Helen Crawford's face appeared via video link from Florida. She was frail, but her voice was clear as she told her story. The story of another son and the same manipulative woman. A story so identical to mine, it sent a visible chill through the jury box. Tyler's defense attorney tried his best. He painted a picture of a loving, panicked son, worried about his mother's precarious financial future, who was simply manipulated by a predatory wife. It was a plausible story, right up until the prosecutor played the audio recordings. The sound of Tyler laughing with Madison about cutting Mom off, and his cold, impatient voice from the restaurant, telling me I wouldn't have to worry about signing anything once the guardianship was approved. That was the end of the loving son narrative. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the stand, my back straight. I looked at the jury, and I told them everything. I spoke in a calm voice, though it broke when I had to recount the words I'd overheard. I told them what it felt like to find the loan on my house. I told them what it felt like to realize, sitting at my own dining room table, that I was no longer a mother to my son, but a number on a spreadsheet, a cash cow to be slaughtered. In his closing argument, the prosecutor pointed right at Tyler and Madison. "This isn't just theft," he said, his voice ringing out. "This is a crime against the most basic, sacred trust on this earth, the trust a mother places in her child. And it must be punished, not just for Lorraine Hale, but for every senior citizen who is a target." The judge was unsparing. Madison Cross was found guilty of grand theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and felony elder abuse. She received a sentence of 9 years in state prison. My son, Tyler Hale, was found guilty of co-conspiracy and systematic embezzlement. He was sentenced to 6 years, with mandatory restitution that would be garnished from any income he earned for the rest of his life. The court immediately issued the order returning all seized funds to the newly formed Mesa Horizon Trust. Every document I had signed under duress, including that power of attorney, was declared null and void. The judge made it a point to state for the record that I was, and had always been, perfectly and completely competent. Afterward, in a small, quiet room behind the court, Naomi asked me one last question. "The defense will ask for a sentencing appeal," she said gently. "If you wrote a letter, asking the judge for leniency for Tyler. I stopped her. I shook my head. Naomi, my son has been given every opportunity, every advantage, and every second chance a person could have, all from me. This is the first time in his entire life he is being forced to face the true consequences of his own actions. I would not be his shield. Not this time. Not ever again. But I had one last move to make. It was, I suppose, an act of revenge, but one I wrapped in the veil of philanthropy. I signed the documents to establish the Jack Hale Foundation. Using a significant portion of the money I had just recovered, the foundation would provide free legal and financial aid to elderly individuals in Arizona who were the victims of familial financial abuse. And I had Naomi draft one very specific, ironclad clause that Tyler Hale, by name, was permanently and irrevocably barred from ever receiving any benefit from, or having any association with, this foundation or my personal estate. When I walked out of the courthouse, Gloria was at my side, her arm linked through mine. The reporters swarmed us, a wall of microphones and flashing cameras. One of them yelled out, "Mrs. Hale, after all this, do you still consider him your son?" I stopped. I turned toward the cameras, my face bare. "I once lost everything by loving the wrong person," I said, my voice clear and carrying over the noise. "And today, I got it all back. Not just the money, but the right to live without being afraid of my own son." I turned, and with Gloria, I walked away from the courthouse, never looking back, leaving the shouting, the cameras, and the sound of the steel prison doors closing on the son I had been forced to bury. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. Be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.